Come back. Now, during the last general election in Kenya, promises regarding the lowering of the high cost of living were made by all four presidential candidates. The Kenya Kwanza team took the day after the hotly contested August 9th poll and quickly assured Kenyans that they would fast-track measures to address the economic challenges affecting Kenyans. 100 days later, the new administration has had to balance the thin line between poetic electoral campaign promises and the reality of managing Kenya's tight fiscal space. Now, our reporter Denis Otieno engaged experts on this matter, and he filed the following report.
Gladys Masawe neatly lays her fruits on a designated spot in a tiny kiosk at Nairobi's Kilimani area. She confesses it hasn't been business as usual for a small trade.
Kabla ya corona kazi ilikuwa. Sasa hivi unauza lakini vitu viko juu. Sasa unakuta yani hamna kitu ambacho unafanya.
These days, she says she's lucky if she's to meet just half of her weekly earnings.
Hii sehemu tuseme ni watu wa ofisi. Kuna wakati wanakuwa na mshahara, kuna wakati hawana mshahara. Wakati hawana mshahara, kazi inarudi chini. So mwisho wa mwezi kazi inakuwa juu kidogo tena. Tena ikifika tena hivyo katikati, kazi inaenda chini tena.
Masawe is one of a growing number of Kenyans who are being forced to make hard choices as the rising cost of living in the country spirals out of control. Not far from her shop, we meet Cyrus Okwayo, a car wash attendant who is equally feeling the pinch of the tough economic times, together with his colleagues.
Wangefanya mpango ya mwananchi mdogo vile unaweza pata kidogo ukule uamuke uende, hakungekuwa mambo mingi. Lakini sasa washakasa sana. Inabidi hata sisi wenyewe wadogo hatufiki pale. Bado ni mbaya sababu hata huyu customer wangu akikuja nikimwambia leo hii gari naona ni mbaya sana niongeze hata 50 juu anakataa na niambia na mimi nitatoa wapi. So inabidi mimi nivumilie ule customer wangu vile ameniambia ndio kesho ingine tena akuje.
For example, pengine unapata 10,000, nyumba unalipa shilingi 5,000. Na unga vile iko namna hiyo, kila kitu iko namna hiyo, watoto wako shule. Utalipa nyumba na usomesha watoto na upate hata fare ya kuenda kazi na upate lunch, itawezekana kweli?
Inflation in Kenya, East Africa's biggest economy, is running at a 5-year high, driven by jumps in prices of basic food and fuel. Inflation stood at 9.5% in November this year, representing a slowdown of 100 basis points compared to 9.6% in October. Since June this year, the rate breached the target range of 2.5% to 7.5%, prompting the Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee to raise benchmark interest rates to curb consumer spending. Since May, the committee has raised the benchmark interest rate by 175 basis points to 8.75%, signaling lenders to raise the cost of borrowing, making life harder for many. Lowering the cost of living was an agenda deeply rooted in the manifesto of the Kenya Kwanza team during the August 9th general election.
The cost of living in Kenya is unbearable, and millions of Kenyans today are asking themselves what happened. We had a solid plan in the Big Four agenda. Unfortunately, that was not to happen because the handshake debacle denied the people of Kenya the chance to move their country forward. And that is the opportunity Kenya Kwanza wants to seize and decisively, deliberately work on creating millions of jobs and work on producing enough food so that we can reduce the cost of living, we can create millions of jobs for our young people, and we can transform our country.
But after at least 100 days in office, a majority of the pledges, such as cheap unga and fuel, are yet to be fulfilled. Consumers are still exposed to high commodity prices. For instance, a 2-kilogram packet of maize flour is retailing at an average of 180 shillings. In a move to create an equilibrium, the new administration announced the removal of flour and fuel subsidies.
The government argument is that that is not sustainable. You cannot subsidize consumption. Makes sense. The only challenge is that in the immediate effect, the kind of impact it has on people's pockets, because we are talking of poor households, and you do realize that in a poor household, the biggest share of their budget, share of the household wallet, is on food. So if you're telling this person that you have to wait for another 9 months for you to be able to enjoy, good prices, so what happens in the immediate short term? I think the government move is in the right direction, but it should have been phased out such that people they can access at least basic needs, food and all that.
Instead, the government embarked on a focus to reduce fertilizer prices, with Treasury releasing 3.6 billion shillings in September this year to subsidize the input.
Kenya is not an oil-producing country. Kenya is not an technological selling country. Kenya is an agricultural country. So when we are able to set a strong base for agricultural production, we have food security at hand. We ensure that everybody can place food on their own table if they cannot get from their farm, but they can get at a cheaper cost from someone else's farm.
Economic observers reckon long-term measures on macroeconomic level will go a long way in easing the burden faced by consumers.
We must address our tax regime because we cannot fall into the fallacy that we are going to tax ourselves into prosperity. That's not going to happen. And then we must address our spending priorities. What are those areas that have the most impact to make sure that as many Kenyans as possible can access opportunities?
What we are talking about is a strategy that is just to be implemented. Remember, we first create the strategy, then we take it for approval, cabinet, whatever. Then after that, we go to implementation and monitoring. So what I can say is that the scorecard so far is 7 out of 10, because this is the implementation stage, the development stage.
With Kenya's economy still in the doldrums, analysts reckon the government should focus on strategies that go beyond political times as it tries to tame the high cost of living. Denis Otieno, Citizen TV, Nairobi.